Hello. The yin postures in this yoga practice will include butterfly, both sides of half happy baby pose, baby frog, which I like to call warrior 4, both sides of eye of the needle pose, and then finally seal pose. The theme for class will be honoring your knees and contemplating exactly what honor really means. What might be helpful is gathering up a few props if you have them. If you have standard studio props like a couple of blocks and a bolster and a few blankets, then by all means get those. If you don't have those props, that's okay. You can use whatever you have around the house. Maybe you have some pillows or blankets or couch cushions, and just have them handy. You may be someone who does not need to use any of them, but if you decide that they might be helpful, then they're good to have around. And so we'll get started. This practice starts with some breath work and then a short yang warm-up before we get into the yin postures. So the breath work first. Find a stable, accessible seat. I'm going to recommend sitting cross-legged if you can. If you can't, that's okay. You can sit in a chair, you can sit with your legs out in front, or some other stable seat that's not painful here. If you are sitting cross-legged or don't normally sit that way and you find it rather a little bit uncomfortable, notice that I'm sitting up on some height. I'm sitting up on a bolster. You can also sit up on things like blocks. Also notice that I have nice soft padding blankets underneath me, and so you can do the same. You can put as much padding as you need to help get some of the discomfort out of joints that might be pressing into the floor. If there's not a lot of discomfort, then maybe don't use the props. Maybe just sit on a mat or sit on the hard floor too. This is part of the experimentation here. Then take a moment to soften your face, deepen your breath, and notice your own inhales and exhales. I'm going to suggest a breathing exercise, but maybe you're satisfied with just noticing, being fascinated with your own breath. I'm going to have you be fascinated with your knees here in a moment too. But I'll suggest the breathing technique of what I call just 4 to 7 breathing. And that means on your next exhale, when you inhale, nice slow complete inhale that takes you to the count of 4. So as you're inhaling, you're slowly counting 1, 2, 3, 4 at the very end of your inhale. And then exhale much more slowly to a slow count, the same count of 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at the end of your exhale. And then another inhale of 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can just continue this if this is comfortable to do. You can always drop it at any time and come back to normal natural breath. But maybe try to keep this up. And while we're doing this for the next moment, I'd like to have you take your hands, find your knees, and then just start giving your knees a nice massage. Front parts of the knees with your hands. It can be a light massage, it can be a deep massage. Maybe notice any kind of little interesting pressure points. Maybe notice the general shape of the knee. Maybe notice where bone and muscle meet in the knee. Then just kind of the characteristics of your own knee. And this is kind of a way to just touch base and say, hello, knee. Knee's kind of a really important synovial joint in our bodies. It supports a lot of our body weight. In fact, knee joint supports more body weight than our hip joints do, even though we may think of the hip joint as more critical. But our knee joints definitely have to support a lot of weight when we're standing up. So it's nice to just check in and say, hi, knees. So a couple more breaths here. just to create some awareness for the knees. That is the theme for class, is to honor the knees. And it has, this phrase, honor the knees, has a much broader scope. You can honor any part of the body, any joint, any area. But what does honor really mean? Well, first, to honor something, you have to notice it. And that's what we're doing here. We're noticing the knees by massaging them, maybe giving them a break. So one final breath, and then you can go back to your normal natural breath. You can stop the knee massage. And then we'll do some cat and cows here. But instead of the traditional cat and cows on hands and knees, we'll do seated cat and cows. So switch the crossing of your legs, however they were crossed. See how that feels. Now, if that creates pain, then go back to the way you were seated before. But if it just creates a little bit of noticing the difference in here, then it maybe means you need to sit this way more to kind of even out the asymmetries of how you're seated cross-legged. We all have a dominant way of we seat, which is fine. Let's just see how this feels too. And then we'll start a round of seated cat and cow, just to keep the knees off of the floor here, just to say, okay, I don't always have to be in table. I don't always have to have my knees pressing into the ground when I warm up my spine. So hands behind your torso nice and long, and then round your spine towards the wall behind you. You can tuck your head and your chin, you tuck your tailbone forward, top of your pelvic bone moves back, so you're in this forward fold here. This is seated cat pose. And then for seated cow pose, you're tilting your pelvic bone forward, so top of your pelvic bone tries to tilt forward. Move your breastbone forward to arch and extend the back of your spine into a back bend here. And then slowly bring yourself back into a forward bend. And then now you got the idea. And then just continue to move at your own pace between a back bend and a forward bend. So we can do this spinal flexion and extension, this cat and cow maneuver, without actually having to be on hands and knees. In fact, I'll demonstrate this from the side, just kind of show you what I'm doing here. So my knees are comfortable at the moment for me. On a lot of padding here. Maybe one more cycle. And then from here, if you can, I'll suggest changing your seat. Maybe you don't want to change your seat, but I'm going to suggest sitting back on your heels. So take your time, maneuver yourself back. Sit on or in between your heels, and if that's not possible, then this is where you get creative with props. So if you can't sit the way I'm sitting right now, but you could if you could sit up a little bit higher. This is where a couple of yoga blocks might come in handy. Notice that my knees and my heels are still on the soft blankets here. Maybe one block isn't enough, so maybe I do 2 blocks here. Maybe with 2 blocks and with some padding on the floor, this actually feels really comfortable here. Notice that. If this is comfortable but without any props, it would be just torture here. In which case, this is how you can do this here. We'll do a twist while we're here. So bring your hands in front of your torso, interlace your fingers, turn your palms to face away from you, and then extend your arms forward, and then raise your arms up overhead with your arms extended here, and then grow long. So really, by growing long, you're trying to press your hands up towards the ceiling as far as they go. You're pressing with your torso, you're pressing with the very seat of your hips here. And then release your fingers, release your hands, slowly lower your extended arms down to shoulder height. And then very gently twist your torso over to the right side, just as far as it goes. Keep your arms extended here. We won't stay here very long, just a breath here. Head and neck can stay neutral. And again, don't worry about how far you twist it. Come back to center. And then interlace your fingers, turn your palms away, extend your arms out again. Another stretch here, another growing long here, and then release your fingers and arms come out to side and very, very gently twist over to the other side. And then just stay here for a moment and then release. Here, take your blocks off to either side. Maybe place your blocks near one end of your mat if you are using a mat here. And come to hands and knees, and it's okay to have your knees on some padding. So now we are coming to table. And so if you always have trouble with coming to table because of sensitive knees, by all means, take some extra padding like the blankets that I have here. Fold them up as much as you need to have enough cushioning. Now, if you're fine without any cushioning, then I would suggest don't use any cushioning underneath your knees. From table, bring your right foot up between your hands, left knee back. We're still in this yang warm-up, so this looks like dragon pose. We're not actually doing dragon here. We're doing this yang warm-up. Normally we do this in a yoga practice to warm up the hips, and so kind of our attention is in the hips. But today, this practice, I'd like you to kind of just remember the knees. So you have this front knee, which is maybe really obvious here, but you have the back knee. And in this pose, the back knee might be the one that's giving you a lot of feedback here. So if it's telling you that it needs extra padding, put extra padding down there here. So from here, we're going to move back. So slowly move your hips back towards that back heel and lengthen out and extend the front leg. So you're flexing the back leg, extending the front leg. Maybe flex the foot so the toes point up. And if this is really hard to do or unstable, this is where some blocks are handy. So take some blocks, hold the blocks here. And then just kind of fold forward until you're feeling a lot of stuff in the back of this leg, maybe through the back of this knee here. Notice how this knee is feeling. Maybe it feels better. And then slowly bring yourself forward. Notice the sensations in this back knee as you move forward here. Come back to this low lunge. This is, in Yin we call this dragon. In other yoga traditions, this is called half monkey pose. And then bring yourself back. And again, if you have blocks and you like to use the blocks to help stabilize you, then use them. We'll do a couple more cycles here. Maybe you don't use blocks. If you're wanting a lot of pressure in this back knee, you won't have any padding underneath it, and you can try to do these without any assistance from your hands and your arms at all. And just notice if that changes the pressure in these knees. You'll probably notice a change of pressure in the hips too. And then at some point, bring yourself back to table. So we have to do the other side now. So other foot up in front. So left foot up front, right knee back. Notice if it is feeling a goodly amount of pressure. And if that pressure is painful, maybe it means you put some more padding underneath it, or you just skip this exercise. Otherwise, bring your hips back, extend the front leg forward, and the same procedure here. So we're moving just back and forth. Again, I think a lot of instructors like to use this as a hip warm-up. I'm using this exercise here to just see if you can notice how your knees are feeling about this. This is a great hip warm-up, but if you have a cranky knee, it might not be the greatest thing for the knee. If the knee is not cranky, it's a wonderful thing for the knee because the knee is feeling all kinds of gentle pressure in different orientations. So maybe one more cycle here. And then when we move forward again, you can bring yourself back to table. And that's the end of the warm-up. So we'll get started with the first long-held yin posture. First long-held yin posture is butterfly pose. So come to seated, legs out in front. Sit on as much height as you need to. And maybe have padding, just like we started out with this practice, have some padding right here. Bend your knees, put the bottoms of your feet together. Allow your knees to go out to either side here. And then change change the angle or the distance between your heels and your hips so that this is accessible for you. Maybe you're someone that can keep your heels in close, or maybe you're someone that needs to keep your heels far out. This is where you experiment here. So you're noticing how you feel through the hips and through the knees here in this pose. Maybe the knees are floating, maybe that floating sensation makes them feel unstable. So this is where extra props come in. You put them underneath your knees or the legs to stabilize the knees here. Again, this is if you're feeling some sort of instability here. And then you can just stay seated here, or you can fold forward and round forward, and you can put as many props underneath your torso as you need to support the torso here in butterfly. And then we'll just stay here for a few minutes or so. So I'll go over the 3 principles of yin. The first one is called finding your edge. And these 3 principles, at least the first one, is in keeping with the entire theme of this practice. It's honoring your knees, or in this case, honoring your body here. How do you do that? You find a shape that fits you. So this first principle, finding your edge, is finding your own shape, your own stopping points in a particular posture. This is why there's such a detailed discussion, or I give such a detailed monologue on, here, try this padding, here, try this prop, here, try bringing your feet out farther, here, maybe don't fold forward, or maybe fold forward a little bit farther after your body has adjusted to the posture here. And that really already is the essence to this class, or to this practice, is finding honor in your body position. Do you find it through pain and injury? I think we can easily come to an agreement that if you bring your body into a place where you're actually injuring it, causing trauma, that's not honoring your body. And that's a short debate, right? It's like, yeah, that's probably not honoring your body if you're actively injuring it. So if you are feeling real pain, and my definition of pain is sharp, biting, burning, torquing sensations that really are telling you that you're tearing something apart, that something is actually getting injured, then that's not honoring your body. You need to experiment and find a different shape. So we have about 1 more minute here in butterfly. Honor your body by noticing how you feel. Notice how your knees feel in this position. Notice how the rest of you feels. Even though I'm going to be kind of pointing out the knees in this practice, it is a full body practice, so you're paying attention to how the rest of you feels. The next principle for yin is stay for a while, create stillness. It means you can adjust the posture, but you're not jumping in and out of the posture. And then you stay for some time here. So we'll stay in this posture for about 3 or 4 more breaths here. Maybe reestablish your edge, reestablish that honor in your system here. And then when you're ready, maybe use your hands and your arms on the floor to push your torso up. And then when you get up, maybe there's some achiness in the torso that you have to work out with a little bit of movement. Now maybe your knees are done with this, or maybe your hips are done with butterfly. So you can take your hands, place them underneath your knees, and gently bring your knees together and extend your legs out long. Maybe point and flex the feet a few times. So before the next yin posture, a little bit of a yang counter pose, just to engage the muscle that surrounds the knee here. So we'll do an active bridge cycling with a block. So if you do have a block handy, you can do this without the block, but with the block, you actually engage a few more muscles. They're a little bit useful, stabilizing the knee. So make your way onto your back. Bend your knees, feet on the floor, about hip width apart. And then if you have a block, place the block on the narrow setting in between your thighs and just gently hug the block with your inner thighs. And this is to create engagement in the inner thighs. The inner thighs help the knees track here. So this is why it's useful to kind of exercise them. Arms are on the floor, head, neck, shoulders comfortably on the floor. On your next inhale, push through your feet and your shoulders to lift your hips up while squeezing the block. You may not go as high as if you didn't have the block, but that's okay. And then slowly bring yourself down. And then do a few more cycles here. Maybe you can create a vinyasa out of this. So on a big inhale, bring yourself up. Exhale, gently lower your spine. Kind of round it and roll it back down here. So a couple more cycles. Inhale. And lift the hips as high as they'll go. Again, still holding the block. Maybe it's starting to get a little bit hard here. And then lower everything back down. One more cycle here. At your own pace here. Maybe lift just a little bit higher this time. And then very gently lower everything back down. When your hips are back on the floor, then you can release the block. And put the block off to one side. Roll to one side. And then the next yin posture is half happy baby pose, which actually also starts just lying on your back. So make your way onto your back. Maybe start with both knees bent here. And then draw your left knee into your torso. So this is the beginning of half happy baby pose. Can give your left knee a hug. See how this feels. While you're here, extend the right leg out and along the floor. Let your right leg just rest here. See how that feels. If that feels somewhere not good, you can keep the right knee bent. Otherwise, if it's straight and it's fine, you can stay here. This is the first stage. Next stage of half happy baby is bring your left knee over to your left armpit here. And then maybe walk your hands up your shin, point the bottom of your foot up towards the ceiling. And then hold your shin with your left hand. Maybe if you can reach, hold the bottom of your foot with your left hand. That might be easier to hold on to if you can reach it. If you can't reach it, then shin, or if you can't reach the shin, just hug. And if this creates too much tension in the knee, hug the back of your thigh rather than the front of your shin. So find your happy baby pose. Right hand can rest on your right hip, just to kind of remind it to stay on the floor. So this is half happy baby. This is where we'll stay for a few minutes. The nice thing about half happy baby is I call it inverted dragon. It's a 180-degree reflection of dragon, and the nice thing about it is this knee is not pressurized. This knee, you can control the pressure by where you stop in this pose here. So if you are dealing with a knee injury or a sensitive knee, this is a nice pose to still get deep into the hip without having to maybe aggravate the knee. It depends on each person. Some people, maybe this really aggravates the knee, but dragon doesn't. So if you want some extra pressure on the top of that kneecap, maybe try regular dragon. So if you're liking happy baby, stay here. Otherwise, if you're wanting something, for most people, this is a little bit more intense, come back into that low lunge and then stay here. So this is dragon here. Again, notice the pressure on this back knee, even the pressure on that back ankle. Maybe you want more pressure on that knee. So you can take the padding out of the way to give it some more pressure. Maybe notice the pressure on this front knee. Maybe you need blocks for support underneath your hands. So a good alternative here. Otherwise we'll stay I'm coming back to half happy baby. We're about halfway through this side of half happy baby here, or inverted dragon. So check in with your breath. Check in with your sensations. Again, this is a whole body experience. So I'm using the knees in this practice as an example, just because we kind of really want to like our knees and treat the knees well, to honor the knees. You have to figure out what that means. So in a lot of yoga classes I've been to, and I've done this even myself in teaching, I will tell people practicing to listen to their bodies. It's another expression. And what I realize is, if you're new to yoga and you've never practiced yoga before, that's sort of a controversial cue. So for a lot of us, we grew up in a culture where the culture subversively taught us to always ignore our bodies or feelings in our bodies for the pursuit of some greater cause. We didn't know we were getting taught this, but we got taught this, and most of us became very good experts at this. So at some point in our life, we realized that we got really good at not listening to our bodies. We're good at that. So when somebody tells you to all of a sudden now start listening to your body, it doesn't make any sense at all, particularly when you're new to yoga. In fact, I find that listening to your body is a cue that you can give to advanced practitioners. And an advanced practitioner will kind of know what the metaphor of that means. It's like, oh, okay. They want you to go through and pay attention to all the subtle sensations and feeling. And if you're an advanced practitioner, that's easier to do. When you're a beginner, you have no idea how to do that because you spent your whole life not doing it. So you got to take baby steps. And you got to notice maybe the big painful sensations and figure out how to turn them into manageable sensations here. So just one more breath here on this side of either dragon or half happy baby. And then very gently release the leg and maybe move it around a bit. You can kind of work it around. Notice, take a moment to reverberate here. Notice if there's any reverberation and where it is. Maybe it's in the middle of the leg, maybe it's in the knee, maybe it's in the hip, maybe it's everywhere. And then just kind of wiggle around and rest here. So we have the other side of half happy baby to do, or dragon here. So if you like dragon, maybe set yourself up for the other side of dragon with the right knee in front. Otherwise, if you're trying happy baby, half happy baby here, go ahead and start this in cycles here. So you can start with the left knee bent, the foot on the floor. Draw the right knee in, and you can just hug the back of the right thigh. This is stage number 2. Maybe hug the front of the shin if that's okay on the right knee. You can extend the left leg long if that's okay. You can raise the bottom of the foot to point up towards the ceiling and grab the shin, or if you can reach the bottom of the foot with the right hand. And the left hand can be there too for help if you need it. Otherwise, the left hand can maybe just rest up to the side or can rest on the hip. And then we'll stay here for a few minutes. So if we're someone new to yoga and we don't really understand the meaning of listen to your body, particularly if we've never done that before, maybe a more useful cue, at least the one I found, is honor your body. Maybe we have no idea how to listen to our bodies, but we might do more appropriate things in a yoga practice if we have the attitude of honoring our body. What do I need to do to honor this manifestation, this embodiment that I need to exist and feel and notice the universe around me? What is honor? And going back to what I mentioned earlier, we can have a quick discussion about pain and injury and trauma and desperation and drama, and say, okay, all of that is probably not honoring the body. So whenever we get too deep into a posture, or too deep into the sensations, too deep into time, we can maybe say, okay, that's maybe not terribly honorable to our bodies here. So that can be well established. We have to remind ourselves, because we go back to not listening to our bodies and being a little bit competitive and driving ourselves into pain. And then in a yoga practice, it's like, okay, this is a yoga practice. I'm not actually here to feel pain or to injure myself. So I need to do something different. Maybe I need to come out a half happy baby. Maybe I'm in dragon and I need to go into half happy baby here. So we have about a minute. We have a little more than a minute left on this side. So notice how your knees are doing. Notice how other parts honor your whole body, not just your knees here. But maybe there's more to honoring knees and joints in this practice than just avoiding injury. And there is. The answer is there is. So our body consists of what's called anti-fragile material. That's living tissue, living cells and living tissue. Our body is made up of is an anti-fragile tissue. It is neither fragile nor robust. It's anti-fragile, and how anti-fragile it is depends on how much stress we give it. Healthy stress that doesn't create pain or injury, but enough pressure and stress so that the cells stay awake and keep doing their jobs to bring vibrancy to the tissues. And that helps keep the body healthy. A couple more breaths here. So that might be part of honoring the body here. One more breath, and then we'll slowly come out of this here. So slowly release half happy baby pose. Inverted dragon here. And then maybe reverberate here for a moment. When you're ready, roll over to one side. Bring yourself up. Coming into the next yin posture. So I call this posture warrior 4 or baby frog. It's actually wide-kneed child's pose here. And so again, since we're thinking about the knees, this posture can create a lot of knee pressure into the floor. Now, if that knee pressure is not painful, maybe don't put any padding underneath it. But if it is a little bit painful or a little bit too uncomfortable, then by all means, give yourself permission to add the padding that you need to have underneath your knees. I've put the blanket the long way so that when I come in, I come to hands and knees, and then I bring the knees out wide. And wide for me means the knees go out a little bit wider than my mat. And so I'm making sure that my knees are still on the blanket so that they still have some padding if I need the padding here. And then I allow my hips to shift towards my heels until they stop, wherever they stop for you, and then lower your torso forward, however far it goes here. This is where you might need some more padding. You can have a bolster or a couch cushion, some extra pillows or blankets, just whatever you need underneath your torso here. And then just notice here how this is feeling. And that's the posture. So we'll stay here. We'll just stay here for a few minutes. And you can get in touch with the sensations in your hips, but for a lot of us, we're feeling that pressure in our knees. And if it's maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but not painful,
it turns out that can actually be a healthy thing. So by the way, if you're someone who wants a lot of pressure in your knees, particularly the knee capsule itself, you're not getting much from baby frog here, from warrior 4. You can come into full frog here. If you'd like to try that, then again, the idea is maybe you do have to have some padding underneath your knees. Maybe you have to have it underneath your ankles here too. For full frog, you basically kind of starts out like baby frog, but you move your torso and your hips forward, bring your shins away from each other so that they're parallel. Maybe adjust the knees here. And now you get some sideways pressure on the knees, as well as deep hip opener here in full frog. And then just notice here how that pressure feels in the knees and in the ankles. Again, if it's not painful, just kind of uncomfortably pressureful, that might be okay. That might actually be healthy for the knees here, because that pressure, it's a form of compression. So tension and compression, controlled light form of it, actually good for the connective tissue. And that's what the knee is basically. It's basically the knee joint itself. Very little muscle in it. It's all different types of connective tissue: bone, cartilage, ligaments, meniscus, synovial fluid. That's what the knee actually is here. And if you're in a posture like full frog, probably definitely feeling the pressure in the knees, and probably feeling it if you're in baby frog, or if you're in this wide-legged child's pose. So again, that's what you're kind of keeping an eye on, your mind's eye on, while you're in this pose. Again, in yin yoga and in a lot of yoga, the intent of a posture is often to open up the hips or the spine. Particularly in yin, the main area of focus is the low back and the hips. But of course, our extremities can often take a lot of abuse by trying to get into this region. And the answer is find a way to get into that region without abusing our extremities, our other joints that are just as important here. So maybe a couple more breaths here in baby frog. And then when you're ready, come out. Bring yourself up. Come to seated. Slowly come out of frog if you're in frog. Come to seated. Legs out in front, knees bent, feet wide, and maybe just windshield wiper your knees as a counter pose activity to kind of release the inner hips here. Again, feet can be up as far as they need to be so the knees are not strained. And again, maybe we want the knees to feel a little bit of pressure, a little bit of healthy motion to keep the tissues within the knee capsule healthy here. And then make your way into the next yin posture, is eye of the needle here. So make your way onto your back. Again, this is another hip opener, but the idea is to keep track of what the knees are doing here. So for eye of the needle, lay on your back, knees bent, feet on the floor, about hip width apart. And then bring in your right leg, put your right ankle on your left thigh, and let your bent right knee wander out wide to the right here. This is the beginning of eye of the needle. If you feel enough sensation in your hip, this is good. Here, if you're wanting a little more, start bringing the left leg in and clasp the left leg behind, clasp your hands behind the left thigh, and just slowly breathe things in until you find another stopping point. So at this point, maybe this is where people also start to feel their knees. If you don't, that's great. You can focus on the hip opening action of this posture here. If it's okay with this knee, you can put your hands on the shin and pull the shin in if this knee is fine with that. that knee is not, if the left knee is not fine with it, hands go behind the left thigh. And then the left knee, left shin can kind of float, and the left knee can do whatever it wants to here. So this is the pose. And then you can just stay here. This is another variation where the knees are kind of just floating in the air. And so maybe they're okay this way. Who knows? But if you do want some pressure on the knees, and sometimes we do want pressure in the knees to keep them healthy, as long as they're not painful, you might want to try Sleeping Swan instead. You can use props here in Sleeping Swan, so if you're good in Eye of the Needle, stay here. Otherwise, for Sleeping Swan, maybe have a prop handy. Come to hands and knees, bring the right foot up, inch the left knee back. Right foot moves over to the left side. You're lowering the right knee. And if your hips and knee doesn't make it all the way down to the floor, get a big prop like a bolster. Place it underneath that front thigh and front hip. And then lower your hip and thigh down onto that bolster. What that might do is give your knee enough room to not be torqued so that you can focus on the hip opening action back here. You can bring this heel in closer to your hip to help this knee out, just to make this a hip opener, not a knee opener. Otherwise, if it feels good to have some pressure in that front knee, then maybe you don't need a prop here. And you can feel that pressure in the front knee as long as it feels okay. And okay means no sharp burning pain in that front knee. And then, in other words, find your version of this where you are feeling some pressure point. You might feel a little bit of pressure in that back knee here. So a little more than a minute to go in Eye of the Needle, or maybe you've decided that you like Sleeping Swan better. So find your breath. Notice how things are going here. So sometimes I like to talk in terms of yin versus yang. So all tissues in the body are anti-fragile. They all need to be exercised in their appropriate way. Muscle needs to be exercised in its appropriate fashion. Connective tissue, which is what a joint capsule is made up of, needs to be exercised in its appropriate way. Now, in a lot of yang type of exercises, the focus is on muscle fiber rather than on connective tissue. And it's very active and dynamic, so there's oftentimes very, very forceful, active movements to try to get the circulatory system moving, to try to get the blood flowing, try to get the muscles working, to bring health to the muscles and to the circulatory system. This is critical to our overall health. This is very good. We need to do something like that. And it can be something as simple as just simply getting up and going for a gentle walk. It doesn't have to be Olympic medal triathlon, although that's wonderful if you like to do such things here. So one more breath here, and then go ahead and release Eye of the Needle on this side here. You can reverberate here, come out of Sleeping Swan, and allow yourself a little bit of time to just kind of recuperate here. We'll do the other side, though. We'll get set up for the other side of Eye of the Needle. This time, it's the left ankle on the right thigh. Left knee is out wide. And you can just stay here with the right foot on the floor. Next stage, bring the right thigh in, clasp behind the right thigh with your hands to hold it in place, or clasp your hands in front of the left shin, paying attention to the right shin, paying attention to what that right knee is telling you. The right knee doesn't like the pressure. You always bring your hands back behind the thigh here. And then you just draw everything in until you have found a good edge. Or maybe you decide Sleeping Swan on this side here.
So you move into Sleeping Swan with however many props that you like to use here. Then we'll stay here for a while. Sometimes the motion in yang practice is very dramatic, very forceful, very impactful. So the yang instructors will often coach you to engage the muscles that surround the knee joint. So the knee joint itself is basically just connective tissue. When you're doing a yang practice, you're exercising the muscle, and you're maybe exercising the muscle around the knee. And the instructor might tell you that you want to strengthen and exercise the muscle around the knee to protect the knee. This is of course all correct for very forceful, dynamic, impactful motion on the knee. And is why you want to keep the muscles strong around the knee. But if you don't exercise, so that's exercising the muscle around the knee. That's not necessarily exercising the knee joint itself. And if you don't ever exercise the connective tissue in the knee joint, you may end up with a very fragile knee, aka a sensitive or an injured knee, even though your muscles around your knee joint might be very strong from all the yang activities. So you do want to exercise the connective tissue joint itself, and that involves a little bit more of a yin attitude. So the connective tissue likes very light traction, compressions and tensions. And that's what we're doing here when we do other postures. And when we press the knee into the floor, we're creating these gentle compressions and tensions that are actually very helpful for the knee. Maybe this doesn't make sense, but another way to put this is, so in a yang world, where all you do is strengthen the muscle and you forget about the connective tissue and the joint capsule, then you're creating strong muscles. Do you want to create strong muscles to protect a fragile knee, or do you want to create strong muscles to protect a healthy knee? I think most of us would probably agree it's like, well, I want to have strong muscles to protect my knee, but I also want a healthy knee. And then the answer is okay, we have to think of things that strengthen the muscle around the knee joint. And then we also need to think of things to do to strengthen the knee. So about 6 more breaths here on this side of Eye of the Needle or Sleeping Swan or whatever version of modification that you've found here. And that's the idea. That's the idea behind yin. It's also the idea behind honoring the knee. So we want to honor the knee by cultivating a healthy knee. And that means not injuring it or creating pain, but it also means exercising the connective tissue in the synovial joint in the appropriate fashion. Not like muscles. Those need to be exercised too. So you want to have strong muscles that ring the knee so that it can brace and stabilize the knee during dynamic and forceful movement. But you want the knee itself, the joint itself, to be healthy. And that's part of honoring it. So slowly release yourself out here. And then you can do a little bit of reverberation here after Eye of the Needle. Bend your knees, roll over to one side, bring yourself. Come back to hands and knees. Come back to table. Now we'll try cat and cow again, this time from table. And you can decide whether you want padding or whether you don't want padding underneath your knees. Either one is correct depending on how your knees are feeling. If they want a little bit of padding, give them a little bit of padding here. And then a little bit of cat and cow. So maybe round your spine, cat, and then come into cow. And then just a few cycles here. Our last posture will be a back bend here. So maybe one more cycle. We're coming down into seal pose, and seal pose may not be for everyone. It might be too much of a back bend. So there'll be an alternative. But
Basically lay down onto your belly, legs comfortably extended out behind you. And then hands up behind your shoulders. Turn your fingers out so they point away from your center line. And then press your torso up until your arms are extended and you can lock your elbows off. Now, if you can't do this, and this is creating a ton of pain here, then you have to practice seal. Seal is a very deep back bend, but if this is feeling nice, maybe try to stay here and seal for a while. Otherwise, come down to Sphinx. For Sphinx, just bend your elbows, put your elbows underneath your shoulders, shoulder width apart. Hands can be in Sphinx, so they can be clasped. You can hang your head, you can hold your head up, you can put your head on a prop. And we'll go ahead and let our legs be extended here now, since we've flexed the knees a lot during this practice. And so now it's okay to just kind of let the knees be in a bit of a neutral position as we get a little bit into the back here with whatever back bend you've chosen. Maybe Sphinx is the best option. But if you're finding seal not painful, just intense, maybe try seal. You maybe get deeper into the spine with the compression. You might feel the front line of tissue along the front of your body here. So again, we're trying to create a healthy exercise or stress on the connective tissue, which we do with light, long-held traction to create healthy connective tissue. And that's a nice way to honor the connective tissue, is to keep it healthy. It's a nice way to honor the knees, is to keep the knees healthy through yin type activities and yang type activities that help create healthy muscles to brace the knees during dynamic, forceful movements here. So you want to do both. So when a yang instructor tells you that you need to protect your knees with strong muscles around your knees, they're correct. But you also want to protect healthy knees rather than fragile knees here. So a little bit of both is involved, and that's what I think is a more complete definition of honoring your knees, honoring the different parts of your being and your body here. So we're going to try to stay here for another minute in seal pose. If this ever gets to be too much, you can come out of this completely and rest, or you can come down into Sphinx if this new edge in Sphinx is something a little bit more acceptable. Do different things with your heads. I like to just let my head hang in Sphinx and seal. You can also just let your head hang back. You get a nice stretch through the front of the throat. I'm not going to do that because if I stretch my throat too much, I won't be able to talk. And so here, 4 more breaths or so. Check in how you're doing. Maybe 1 more breath. And then when you're ready, very gently lower yourself down onto the ground. Release your arms. You can just stay here. Maybe rest your head on overlapped hands here. Maybe drag up one knee, one thigh up alongside your hip. This helps to release the hips and the low back, which might feel nice after a long back bend like this. And just stay here. And just notice the rebound. Again, the knee shouldn't be in any pain here. You're just trying to help the back and the hip here. And the knee is an auxiliary joint here. And then bring yourself up. So a little bit of integration before we move into our resting pose. I'm going to suggest some twists Here, so you can lie on your back. Bend your knees, draw your knees into your chest. And then very gently lower both knees over to one side. Again, the knees can be however much flexed they need to be, but not so that they're in pain here. So if you lowered your knees over to one side, the opposite shoulder lowers over to the opposite side. Arms are out in T or cactus arm position. And just notice this twist, maybe 1 or 2 more breaths. When you do get to your next inhale, use the inhale to bring your knees back up to center. Lower both of them slowly to the other side. Opposite shoulders trying to stay low to the ground. Doesn't have to be on the ground, but we want to make sure that we are in a twist here. A couple breaths here. And then bring the knees back up. Maybe give the knees a final hug. I often tell people in yoga practices, it's like give your knees a hug because you'll miss them when they're gone. Here. And then roll over to one side. Now, resting pose. You can rest in a traditional version like Savasana. I'm going to recommend legs up the wall pose. So find some wall space. Maybe even have some padding next to the wall. The hardest part about legs up the wall here is getting into legs up the wall. So roll yourself up. This might take a couple of tries. And then when you get your legs up the wall, let's go ahead and relax and settle here. Maybe you'd like a pillow underneath your head. Maybe you like clothing here. So the idea with legs up the walls is actually an inversion. So your legs are above your heart. Your legs are a little bit released here. Your knees are released. By the way, legs are extended, but knees can be bent or soft if they need to be here. Everything else, arms, shoulders, head, neck, torso, kind of just relaxing, rooting into the ground here. And if this is not your ending posture, then find a different posture. I'm ending this practice because now my knees are a little bit relaxed and released. They're placed in this position above the rest of my torso. So I know my knees I'm not putting any weight on my knees. They can be released here. And I can think about these knees. I can breathe into the knees here as I just rest. So soften your face, soften your eyes. Allow your thoughts to be fuzzy. Soften your shoulders and your arms, your hands and fingers. Feel the pressure points that your torso is experiencing as it presses into the floor and the floor presses back. Notice the blood circulation up and down your legs here. It might feel interesting because your legs are inverted here. Maybe visualize or imagine old lymph material in the ground substance in your legs, slowly kind of trickling down out of your toes and feet, down through your shins, particularly old lymph and ground substance material that was hanging out in your knee joints, your synovial joints, and moving them around has kind of circulated that material. Slowly it'll move to a place where it can finally be replenished and revitalized here. And notice your breath. Notice the rise and fall of your rib cage, your abdomen. And just stay here.
give yourself permission to have nowhere to go and nothing to do. Maybe cultivate a little bit of gratitude for your knees. After all, gratitude is the highest honor. When you're feeling ready, maybe begin to deepen your breath. You can start to make little motions, fingers and toes. Expand that motion into wrists, into ankles. Maybe make little motions with arms, slight motions with legs here. At some point, slowly bend your knees, see if you can place your feet against the wall, and then just to push you back slightly to make it easier to roll on one side. If you've been laying in Savasana, you can bend your knees and roll onto one side. When you get there, stay there for a moment. Do generate and create deep sense of gratitude for not only your knees, but the rest of your embodiment, the rest of your manifestation. For the universe is ecstatically joyful that your knees and the rest of you are here. And when you feel ready, bring yourself up, come to a comfortable seat. When you get there, bring your hands together in front of your heart center. I'll end this practice with an Om. The inner light in me honors the inner light in you. Namaste.